There comes a point in life when nothing seems to change. You wake up, go through the same routine, carry the same thoughts, and face the same quiet frustration at the end of the day. From the outside, everything looks normal, but inside, you feel stuck, like you've been standing still while time keeps moving forward. You've probably asked yourself questions like, why does it feel like I'm trying, but nothing is improving? Why do other people seem to move ahead while I stay in the same place? Why does life feel heavy even when nothing is technically wrong? This feeling doesn't come from laziness, it doesn't come from a lack of intelligence, and it doesn't mean there's something broken about you. It comes from waiting for the right moment, waiting to feel ready, waiting for clarity, confidence, and your motivation to arrive before you act. At first, waiting feels responsible. It feels calm. It feels like you're being patient with life. But over time, waiting becomes exhausting. Because deep down, you know you're not resting. You're postponing. And postponing your life slowly drains your energy. Here's something rarely talked about. Most people don't feel stuck because life is hard. They feel stuck because they're asking the outside world to change before they change inside. They wait for better conditions, better timing, better circumstances. But life doesn't work that way. The outside world usually responds after something shifts internally, after a decision is made, after standards change, after a person stops negotiating with their own potential. This audiobook exists for people who are tired of waiting, and not the dramatic kind of tired, but the quiet, heavy tired that builds when you keep telling yourself soon, and soon never comes. If you're here, there's a good chance you've already tried to improve your life. You've listened to advice. You've reflected. You've promised yourself things would be different next month, next year, or after one more break. And yet, here you are. That doesn't mean you failed. It means the strategy was incomplete. Change doesn't begin with fixing your life. It begins with changing who you are being in moments when nothing exciting is happening, when no one is watching, when results are invisible, when motivation is low and progress feels slow. Those moments are where identity is built. This audiobook is not here to entertain you, as it's not here to distract you from your problems or give you temporary motivation that fades by tomorrow. It's here to help you rebuild something more important than circumstances, your relationship with yourself. Over the next hour, we're going to explore what happens when you stop waiting for life to improve and start improving how you show up internally. We'll talk about discipline without punishment, growth without pressure, and change without pretending to be someone you're not. You won't hear loud promises. You won't be told to hustle harder, and you won't be asked to become perfect. Instead, you'll be invited to become consistent. Because consistency, quiet, unglamorous consistency, is what separates people who stay stuck from people who slowly transform their lives. You don't need to overhaul everything, yet you don't need to escape your current situation. You don't even need to feel confident. You just need to stop waiting for a version of yourself that feels ready. Ready is not a feeling. Ready is a decision. And that decision begins inside, long before anything changes on the outside. If you're listening to this and something resonates, take a moment to think about someone you care about, someone who feels lost, someone who's quietly struggling, someone who might be waiting just like you were. Share this video with them, not because it has all the answers, but because it might remind them that real change doesn't start out there, it starts within. Chapter 1. Why waiting for change keeps you stuck. There is a quiet habit that keeps more people stuck than fear, failure, or lack of talent. It's the habit of waiting, not waiting in an obvious way, not sitting still and doing nothing, but waiting while staying busy, waiting while thinking, waiting while preparing, waiting while telling yourself that you'll act once things feel clearer, calmer, or more certain. This kind of waiting feels productive, it feels mature, it even feels responsible. But over time, it becomes a cage. The problem with waiting is not that you're doing nothing. The problem is that you're training your mind to associate movement with risk and delay with safety. Every time you postpone action, your nervous system learns a lesson. I'm safer when I don't move. And the longer this lesson is repeated, the harder it becomes to break. There's a simple truth most people don't want to face. Life doesn't reward readiness, it rewards momentum. Waiting keeps you stuck because it removes urgency. When there's no decision, there's no pressure. When there's no pressure, there's no identity shift. And without an identity shift, behavior stays the same. Let me tell you a short story. A woman once shared that she had been wanting to improve her health for years. She didn't ignore it. She thought about it constantly. She read articles, saved workouts, followed fitness accounts, and promised herself that she would start soon. Every Monday felt like a fresh start. Every month felt like another chance. But nothing changed. When she finally asked herself why, the answer surprised her. She wasn't waiting because she didn't know what to do. But she was waiting because starting meant confronting the version of herself she had been avoiding. Once she started, excuses would no longer protect her. Once she started, progress would expose inconsistency. Once she started, she would have to face herself honestly. Waiting felt easier. This is what waiting really does. It delays self-confrontation. As long as you're waiting, you don't have to find out who you truly are under pressure. You don't have to test your discipline. You don't have to see where you quit. Waiting preserves a comfortable illusion, the belief that you could change if you really wanted to. But potential that's never tested becomes a burden. Another reason waiting is so dangerous is that it slowly reshapes how you see yourself. You stop seeing yourself as someone who acts. You start seeing yourself as someone who plans. And planning feels safe because it doesn't require risk. It doesn't involve rejection, discomfort, or uncertainty. But planning without action quietly erodes self-trust. Every delayed promise sends a message inward. I don't follow through. I hesitate. I wait. Over time, that message becomes an identity. And identity always wins. People often think they're stuck because life is unfair or circumstances are difficult, but more often than not, they're stuck because they've been practicing hesitation longer than commitment. Here's the part that's uncomfortable to hear. There is no future version of you who suddenly feels ready. That version doesn't exist. There is only the current version of you deciding whether to move despite discomfort or to wait and call it patience. People who change their lives don't feel more confident than others. They simply act before confidence arrives. Confidence shows up later. As a side effect, waiting flips that order. It demands certainty before movement, and life rarely offers certainty up front. Think about it. If clarity came before action, no one would struggle. If motivation arrived on schedule, discipline would be unnecessary. But clarity follows movement. Motivation follows effort. Waiting keeps you stuck because it asks life to prove itself to you before you prove yourself to life. And life doesn't negotiate that way. This doesn't mean you rush blindly or act recklessly. It means you stop demanding emotional permission to do what you already know matters. Send the message. Begin the routine. Have the conversation. Start imperfectly. Not because it feels good, but because it builds trust. Trust is built when you do what you said you would do, even when no one is watching and nothing is rewarding yet. And that trust becomes the foundation for everything else. If you've been waiting, this is not a criticism. It's an invitation. An invitation to notice where delay has become a habit. An invitation to see waiting not as patience, but as avoidance. An invitation to ask a different question, not when will I feel ready, but what would the smallest honest step look like today? Because the moment you stop waiting, something subtle but powerful happens. You stop living in potential. You step into reality. And reality, while uncomfortable at first, is the only place where real change begins. Chapter 2. Stop negotiating with your old self. There is another habit that quietly keeps people stuck, even after they stop waiting. It's not fear, it's not lack of discipline, it's negotiation. Negotiation with the old version of yourself. This negotiation happens in small, almost invisible moments. You wake up and promise yourself you'll start the day differently, more focused, more intentional. But then a voice appears. Just today, take it easy. You can do it later. You've had a long week. You deserve a break. And just like that, the promise dissolves. Most people think they lack discipline. What they actually lack is a clear boundary between who they were and who they are trying to become. As long as your old self still has a voice in your decisions, change will always feel temporary. The old self is persuasive because it sounds reasonable. It doesn't yell. It doesn't sabotage loudly. It simply suggests comfort, familiarity, and delay. And because it sounds like you trust it. But here's the truth. Growth begins the moment you stop negotiating with the version of yourself that wants to stay the same. Negotiation feels fair, it feels balanced, but fairness has no place in transformation. Standards do. Think about how authority works in real life. A leader who negotiates every rule loses credibility. A boundary that changes daily stops being a boundary at all. The same principle applies internally. When you constantly negotiate with yourself, you weaken your own authority. You teach your mind that promises are flexible, effort is optional, and discomfort is something to be avoided rather than endured. Over time, this creates an internal hierarchy where your impulses outrank your intentions. Let me tell you a short story. A man once decided he would start waking up earlier to work on something meaningful before his day began. The first morning, his alarm went off, and he immediately felt resistance. Instead of getting up, he started negotiating. I'll start tomorrow. I just need a little more sleep. 1 hour won't make a difference anyway. He hit snooze. The next day, the same thing happened, and the next. After a few weeks, the habit was gone. Not because he failed, but because he negotiated it out of existence. What he didn't realize was that every negotiation strengthened the authority of his old self. The old self thrives on flexibility. The new self requires commitment. People who change don't become stronger overnight. They simply stop debating certain decisions. They remove choice from areas that matter. They don't ask, do I feel like it today? They decide, this is who I am now. That decision is not emotional, it's structural. When you decide in advance, you reduce friction. You don't rely on motivation or mood. You rely on identity. This is why standards are more powerful than goals. Goals exist in the future. Standards operate in the present. A goal says, I want to be disciplined. A standard says, I don't negotiate with myself anymore. One of the hardest moments in growth is the moment you realize that no one is coming to enforce your boundaries for you. There's no external authority, no accountability unless you create it. That responsibility can feel heavy, but it's also freeing. Because once you accept it, excuses lose their power. And another reason negotiation is dangerous is that it fragments your sense of self. One part of you wants growth, another part wants comfort. And instead of choosing, you let them argue. That internal conflict drains energy. Decisive people are not more motivated. They're more resolved. They know which voice they listen to and which one they don't. This doesn't mean you become rigid or harsh. It means you become clear. Clear about what you tolerate. Clear about what you allow. Clear about what you no longer debate. There's a subtle shift that happens when you stop negotiating. You begin to trust yourself again. Every time you follow through without discussion, you send a message inward. I do what I say. That message compounds. Trust grows. Confidence stabilizes. Identity solidifies. And when identity shifts, behavior follows naturally. You no longer need to push yourself constantly. The action becomes aligned with who you believe you are. This is why willpower eventually fails, but identity endures. The old self survives on loopholes. The new self is built on standards. Ask yourself this honestly. Where have you been negotiating with yourself instead of deciding? Is it your routine, your health, your focus, your boundaries with people? You don't need to change everything at once. That's another trap. But you do need to choose one area where negotiation ends. One promise you stop revisiting. One standard you stop adjusting. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's decisive. The moment you stop negotiating with your old self, you experience a quiet shift. The mental noise reduces. The internal arguments fade. And what replaces them is clarity. Not excitement, not motivation. Clarity. And clarity is enough. Because clarity allows you to move forward even when you don't feel like it. Even when progress is slow. Even when no one is watching. That's how real change happens. Not through force, not through inspiration, but through consistency without debate. When you stop negotiating with your old self, you don't become perfect, you become reliable. And reliability toward yourself is the foundation of a different life. Chapter 3. Control your inner dialogue. Long before your actions change, your inner dialogue decides the outcome. Not the loud thoughts, not the dramatic ones, but the quiet, repetitive voice that speaks to you when no one else is around. That voice shapes how you interpret effort, failure, discomfort, and time. It tells you what something means. And meaning is everything. Two people can experience the same setback. One sees it as proof they're not good enough. The other sees it as feedback. The difference isn't talent or luck. It's the conversation happening inside their mind. Most people never question that conversation. They assume it's the truth. But it isn't. Your inner dialogue is not objective. It's conditioned. It's built from past experiences, habits, environments, and repeated emotional reactions. And if you don't take control of it, it will quietly control you. Here's the problem. Many people speak to themselves in ways they would never speak to someone they care about. They criticize themselves harshly, doubt their ability constantly, and replay mistakes long after they're useful. They call it being realistic. They call it being honest. But what it really is, most of the time, is untrained self-talk. And untrained self-talk drains energy. Think about how often your inner voice says things like, "This is probably not going to work. I always mess this up. What's the point? It won't matter anyway." Those sentences may feel harmless, but they shape behavior. They reduce effort before effort even begins. They create hesitation. They lower standards quietly. Over time, they become instructions. There's a story that illustrates this clearly. A young athlete once struggled during practice, not because he lacked skill, but because every mistake triggered a spiral of internal criticism. One missed attempt would turn into a mental collapse. His body tightened. His focus scattered. His performance dropped. When asked what he was thinking during those moments, his answer was simple. "I keep telling myself not to mess up." That phrase sounds reasonable, but it kept his attention locked on failure. When he changed his inner dialogue to something calmer, something directive instead of judgmental, everything shifted. Not instantly, but steadily. The lesson wasn't about positive thinking. It was about useful thinking. Your inner dialogue doesn't need to be kind all the time. It needs to be clear. There's a difference. Kindness without direction leads to comfort. Harshness without direction leads to paralysis. Clarity leads to action. People who control their inner dialogue don't eliminate doubt. They redirect it. Instead of asking, "What if this goes wrong?" they ask, "What's the next step I can control?" Instead of saying, "I'm not ready," they say, "Do it imperfectly." Instead of replaying mistakes, they extract the lesson and move forward. This shift matters because your mind follows instructions. If your inner voice is vague, emotional, or self-attacking, your actions become hesitant. If your inner voice is calm and directive, your actions become steadier. This is why leaders, real leaders, don't motivate themselves emotionally every day. They give themselves clear commands. Show up. Focus. Finish. Short. Neutral. Direct. When you start speaking to yourself this way, something subtle happens. The emotional noise decreases. You stop debating every move. You conserve energy that can be used to act. Another reason inner dialogue matters is that it shapes how you handle discomfort. If your mind labels discomfort as danger, you avoid it. If it labels discomfort as training, you endure it. The sensation doesn't change. The meaning does, and meaning determines behavior. Most people try to change their habits without changing the language attached to them. That rarely works. The mind resists what it believes is harmful or pointless. But when you change the narrative from "this is hard" to "this is necessary," resistance weakens. This doesn't happen overnight. It's a practice. You catch the thought. You question it. Say you replace it with something more useful, not more optimistic, more accurate. Because the truth is, you don't need to feel confident to move forward. You need to feel directed. Direction beats motivation every time. Ask yourself this. When things get difficult, does your inner voice guide you or judge you? If it judges you, progress slows. If it guides you, progress continues. One builds pressure, the other builds momentum. Over time, controlled inner dialogue creates a stable internal environment. You're less reactive, less dramatic, less thrown off by small setbacks. You stop needing emotional highs to function, and that's a powerful shift, because when your inner voice becomes calm and clear, your external behavior follows. You move with less friction, you recover faster, you stay consistent longer. This is not about silencing your thoughts. It's about choosing which ones you obey. You don't need to argue with every doubt. You don't need to defeat every negative thought. You simply need to stop letting them give orders. When you control your inner dialogue, you reclaim authority over your actions. And that authority, quiet, steady, internal, is what allows real change to take root. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. Chapter 4. Learn to sit with discomfort. There is a moment in every attempt to change when things stop feeling exciting and start feeling uncomfortable. Not painful, not dramatic. Just uncomfortable enough to make you want to step back. This is the moment most people misunderstand. They assume discomfort is a sign they're doing something wrong. They take it as feedback that they should slow down, rethink, or stop altogether. And without realizing it, they return to familiar patterns. Not because those patterns work, but because they feel safe. But discomfort is not a warning. It's an invitation. Discomfort appears when you step outside what your nervous system recognizes as normal. It shows up when you break routine, challenge habits, or hold yourself to a higher standard than before. And that's exactly why it matters. Most people don't fail because they can't change. They fail because they don't know how to stay present when change feels uncomfortable. They mistake discomfort for danger. Think about how often this happens. You start a new routine, and a few days in, resistance appears. Your body feels heavier. Your mind becomes louder. Suddenly, every reason not to continue sounds convincing. You tell yourself, maybe this isn't sustainable, or I'll pick this back up when things feel easier. What you're really saying is, I don't know how to sit with this feeling yet. There's a story that illustrates this clearly. A woman once decided to stop distracting herself at night. No scrolling, no background noise, just silence. The first few evenings felt unbearable. Her thoughts raced, old memories surfaced, anxiety crept in. So she assumed something was wrong, but nothing was wrong. For years, she had avoided stillness. The discomfort she felt wasn't a problem, it was unprocessed emotion finally being given space. When she stayed with it instead of escaping, something unexpected happened. The discomfort softened. Her thoughts slowed. And over time, she became calmer, more grounded, and more in control of herself. Discomfort didn't harm her. Avoiding it had. Here's what most people never learn. Discomfort is temporary, but avoidance creates permanence. When you avoid discomfort, you reinforce the belief that you can't handle it. And that belief becomes a limit you live under. But when you sit with discomfort, even briefly, you teach your nervous system something powerful. I can stay here and survive. That lesson builds resilience. This doesn't mean forcing yourself aggressively or ignoring your limits. It means staying present without immediately reaching for relief. No distraction, no justification, no escape, just awareness. People who grow consistently don't eliminate discomfort. They become fluent in it. They recognize the sensation. They name it, and they continue anyway. Another reason discomfort feels overwhelming is because it exposes internal noise. When you're busy or distracted, you don't hear it. When you slow down, it gets louder. This is why silence, effort, and stillness feel threatening to so many people. They bring you face to face with yourself, and that confrontation can feel unsettling. But avoiding it keeps you dependent on stimulation, approval, and external reassurance. Sitting with it builds internal stability. There's a subtle but important distinction here. You don't need to enjoy discomfort. You need to tolerate it. Tolerance creates capacity. Every time you stay with discomfort without reacting, you expand your ability to handle life. You become less reactive, less impulsive, less controlled by emotion. You stop needing everything to feel good in order to move forward. This skill is especially important when progress slows, because progress often feels boring before it feels rewarding. There's no applause in the early stages, no clear signs that what you're doing is working, just repetition, effort, and uncertainty. And uncertainty is uncomfortable. People who quit at this stage don't quit because they're weak. They quit because they never learned how to sit with the feeling of not knowing yet. They interpret uncertainty as failure instead of transition. Learning to sit with discomfort also changes how you respond to stress. Instead of reacting immediately, you pause. Instead of spiraling, you observe. Instead of escaping, you endure. That pause creates choice, and choice is where power lives. One of the most effective ways to practice this is intentionally delaying relief. Not forever, just briefly. When you feel the urge to distract, wait. When you want to quit, pause. When discomfort appears, stay present for a few breaths longer than usual. You don't need to be heroic. You just need to be honest. Ask yourself, can I stay with this for 10 more seconds? Most of the time, the answer is yes, and 10 seconds becomes 20. 20 becomes a minute. A minute becomes evidence. Evidence that you're stronger than you thought. Over time, discomfort loses its authority. It stops controlling your decisions. It becomes a signal instead of a command. That's when something shifts internally. You stop running from effort. You stop fearing silence. You stop needing constant reassurance. You become grounded, not numb, not detached, grounded. This is the foundation of emotional strength. Not the absence of feeling, but the ability to stay steady when feelings rise. If you want your life to change, You have to become someone who doesn't immediately escape discomfort. Someone who understands that discomfort often arrives right before growth. Not always, but often enough to matter. When you learn to sit with discomfort, you don't just build discipline, you build self-respect, because you're no longer avoiding yourself. And that quiet self-respect changes how you show up in every part of your life. Not loudly, not dramatically, but consistently. Chapter 5. Stop reacting to what you can't control. One of the fastest ways to lose control of your life is to give your attention to things you cannot change. Not occasionally, but habitually. Most people don't realize how much of their energy is spent reacting, emotionally, mentally, internally, to events, opinions, and behaviors that are completely outside their control. A message doesn't get answered. Someone speaks carelessly. Plans change unexpectedly. Progress feels slower than expected, and immediately the mind reacts. Frustration rises. Stories are created. Energy is drained. The problem isn't what happened. It's the reaction that follows. Reaction feels automatic, but it's learned. Over time, your nervous system becomes conditioned to respond instantly, to defend, explain, worry, or replay. And the more often you react, the less control you feel. Because reaction hands power away. Think about how much emotional energy is lost every day to things that don't deserve it. Conversations replayed in your head, outcomes you can't influence, other people's moods, opinions, and decisions. None of these things improve because you react to them, but your internal state worsens. There's a story that illustrates this clearly. A man once described how a single comment from a co-worker could ruin his entire day, not because the comment was cruel, but because he couldn't stop replaying it. He analyzed it from every angle, he imagined what it meant, and wondered how he should respond. By the end of the day, he was exhausted. The comment lasted 5 seconds. The reaction lasted hours. That imbalance is where most people lose their power. Here's the uncomfortable truth, is you cannot control what happens to you, but you can control how long it lives inside you. Reaction gives events permission to stay longer than necessary. People who build emotional strength understand this difference. They don't suppress reactions. They delay them. That delay is everything. Between stimulus and response, there is a pause. And inside that pause is choice. Most people skip the pause. They react first and reflect later, if at all. But the pause is where control is reclaimed. Pausing doesn't mean pretending not to care. It means choosing not to be dragged. When something triggers you, your body reacts before your logic does. Heart rate changes. Muscles tighten. Thoughts speed up. That's natural. What's not inevitable is what you do next. You don't need to respond immediately. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to decide anything in that moment. People often feel pressured to react because they confuse silence with weakness. But silence, when chosen intentionally, is strength. It's not avoidance, it's restraint. And restraint protects energy. Another reason reaction is so addictive is that it creates the illusion of control. When you react, it feels like you're doing something. But emotionally reacting rarely changes the outcome. It only amplifies stress. Calm observation, on the other hand, creates leverage. People who don't react immediately gather information. They see patterns. They respond strategically instead of emotionally. This applies not just to people, but to circumstances. Progress slows. Plans fail. Effort isn't rewarded right away. These moments tempt reaction. This isn't working. I should quit. What's the point? But reacting to temporary discomfort often leads to permanent regret. Those who stay grounded understand that not every feeling deserves action. Not every thought deserves belief. And not every situation requires a response. They ask better questions. Is this within my control? If not, how much energy should it really get? What response serves me long term? These questions create distance, and distance creates clarity. One of the most powerful skills you can develop is emotional containment, the ability to experience emotion without letting it spill into impulsive behavior. This doesn't make you cold, it makes you steady. Steadiness is rare, and because it's rare, it's powerful. When you stop reacting to what you can't control, you begin to notice something important. As your energy returns, you sleep better, you think clearer, you move through challenges with less resistance. Life doesn't become easier, but it becomes quieter inside, and quiet creates focus. There's a practice that helps build this skill. When something triggers you, don't ask, "Why did this happen?" Ask, "What part of this is actually mine to handle?" Often, the answer is simple. Your response, your next step, your attitude, nothing else. Let go of the rest. This doesn't mean lowering standards or accepting mistreatment. It means choosing when and how you engage. Not every battle deserves your energy. Not every problem deserves your emotional investment. Choosing where to place your attention is one of the highest forms of self-respect. Over time, as you react less, people notice. They notice you don't get pulled into drama. They notice you don't escalate. They notice you stay composed. But more importantly, you notice that your sense of control increases. Not because the world changes, but because you stop giving it access to your inner state. That's the real shift. Control doesn't come from managing everything around you. It comes from managing yourself within it. When you stop reacting to what you can't control, you stop leaking energy, and that preserved energy becomes fuel for focus, discipline, and intentional action, quietly, steadily, on your terms. Chapter 6. Build discipline. When no one is watching, there is a version of you that exists only in private. No audience, no validation, no one to impress. That version is the one quietly shaping your future. Most people believe discipline is something you perform, something visible, something others notice. They think discipline shows up when motivation is high, when results are clear, or when someone is holding them accountable. But real discipline doesn't live there. Real discipline lives in moments that feel insignificant. It shows up when skipping would be easy, when no one would know, when the reward is distant or invisible. This is where most people lose momentum, not because they lack willpower, but because they rely on external pressure to behave consistently. They work harder when watched. They focus better when praised. They stay disciplined when progress is obvious. But when those things disappear, effort fades. And slowly, discipline becomes conditional. There's a quiet danger in that. When discipline depends on external validation, your identity becomes fragile. You perform well when conditions are ideal and disappear when they aren't. Life rarely offers ideal conditions. The people who truly change understand something different. Discipline is not about forcing yourself. It's about deciding who you are, especially in silence. Let me tell you a story. A man once committed to improving a skill he deeply cared about. He practiced consistently for a few weeks, energized by progress and excitement. But eventually, the novelty faded. No one commented on his effort. No clear milestones appeared. So he skipped a day, then another, not because he stopped caring, but because the effort felt lonely. That loneliness is where discipline is tested, because discipline without applause feels pointless to many people. But it isn't. It's foundational. Private discipline builds internal alignment. When your actions match your intentions, even when no one is watching, you begin to trust yourself. That trust is quiet, but it's powerful. It stabilizes you. You stop needing motivation to begin. You stop needing recognition to continue. You stop needing pressure to perform. You act because it's who you are. Most people underestimate how deeply this changes their behavior. When discipline becomes identity-based instead of mood-based, effort stops feeling like a fight. It becomes routine, predictable, almost automatic. But this doesn't happen by accident. It's built through small, repeated acts of follow-through. Not dramatic ones, not heroic ones, consistent ones. There's another misconception worth addressing. People often think discipline means intensity. Long hours, extreme routines, pushing until exhaustion. That approach rarely lasts. Sustainable discipline is quiet and boring. It's waking up and doing the thing you said you would do, without negotiating, without dramatizing, without making it a big deal. It's showing up tired. It's continuing when progress feels slow. It's maintaining standards when enthusiasm fades. And here's the truth most people avoid. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your standards. Standards don't require emotion. They require consistency. A standard says, this is what I do, regardless of how I feel. This is why private discipline matters so much, as it trains you to operate without emotional permission. You don't ask yourself if today feels right. You don't wait for motivation to arrive. You don't depend on inspiration to continue. You decide once, and then you repeat. There's a subtle confidence that grows from this. Not the loud kind, the grounded kind. You start to carry yourself differently. You move with less hesitation. You make decisions faster. You trust your ability to follow through, even when things get uncomfortable. That trust is earned, not imagined. And it only comes from evidence that you keep your word to yourself. Another important aspect of discipline in private is restraint. Discipline isn't only about what you do. It's also about what you don't do, what you don't say yes to, what you don't indulge in, what you don't explain away. Restraint builds clarity. When you stop overindulging in distractions, emotional reactions, or unnecessary stimulation, your mind settles. Focus improves, energy stabilizes. You stop leaking attention. This is especially important in a world that constantly invites distraction. Notifications, opinions, endless content. Private discipline protects your attention, and attention is the most valuable resource you have. Where your attention goes, your life follows. People who lack discipline often think they need more motivation. What they actually need is fewer decisions. Decision fatigue kills consistency. Every time you debate whether to act, you drain energy. Every time you negotiate with yourself, you increase resistance. Private discipline simplifies life. You decide once. You repeat often. You remove friction. This doesn't mean life becomes rigid or joyless. It means effort becomes lighter because it's no longer emotionally charged. You stop proving yourself. You stop performing. You start building. There's also something deeply grounding about doing meaningful work in silence. It removes comparison. It removes pressure. It removes the need to be seen. You're no longer chasing validation. You're creating stability. And stability compounds. Over weeks and months, something shifts internally. You no longer identify as someone who tries. You identify as someone who shows up. That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Because once you see yourself as reliable, quitting becomes harder than continuing. Discipline stops feeling like sacrifice. It starts feeling like self-respect, and self-respect fuels consistency far longer than motivation ever could. If you want to change your life, pay close attention to what you do when no one is watching. That's where habits are formed. That's where identity is shaped. That's where momentum quietly begins. Not in moments of excitement, not in moments of praise, but in silence. And the more comfortable you become with disciplined silence, the more unstoppable you become over time. Because while others wait for motivation, you've already built the structure that carries you forward. Quietly, steadily, without needing permission. There is a moment that arrives quietly after enough days of private discipline, as you don't notice it right away. Nothing dramatic happens. No external reward appears, but something inside you settles. You begin to feel less scattered, less reactive, less desperate for reassurance. The urge to quit still appears, but it no longer controls you. It becomes background noise instead of a command. This is what inner stability feels like, and it only comes from doing the work without witnesses. Private discipline teaches you something essential. You don't need to be seen to be becoming. You don't need recognition to grow, and you don't need permission to improve your life. When you show up consistently in silence, you stop bargaining with your future. You stop asking whether effort is worth it. You already know the answer because you've seen who you become when you keep going. That knowing is different from belief. The belief can fade. Knowing is earned. Over time, this changes how you handle pressure. When challenges appear, you don't panic. You don't overthink. You trust your ability to endure and adapt because you've proven it to yourself, repeatedly, and that trust becomes unshakable. This is why discipline in private matters more than any visible success. It builds a version of you that doesn't collapse when conditions are imperfect. A version of you that doesn't need motivation to move. A version of you that keeps going quietly until results have no choice but to follow. Chapter 7. Detach from outcomes. Commit to the process. One of the quiet reasons people lose momentum, even after building discipline, is their attachment to outcomes. They start doing the right things. They show up consistently. They push through discomfort. But then a question appears. Why isn't this working yet? That question seems harmless. Reasonable, even. But underneath it is a dangerous expectation that effort should be rewarded quickly, clearly, and visibly. When that expectation isn't met, doubt creeps in. And doubt shifts focus away from the process, back to the result. This is where many people unravel. They don't quit because they're lazy. They quit because they're watching the scoreboard too closely. Outcomes are unpredictable. They arrive late, unevenly, and often without warning. When you tie your motivation to them, and your consistency becomes fragile, the process, on the other hand, is always available. You can always show up. You can always practice. You can always repeat the behavior. But committing to the process requires letting go of control over timing, and that makes people uncomfortable. There's a story that captures this perfectly. A man once committed to changing a habit that had held him back for years. For weeks, he did everything right. He followed the plan. He stayed disciplined. But nothing seemed to change externally. No breakthrough. No visible improvement. Frustration built. He began questioning whether the effort was worth it, whether he was wasting time, whether something was wrong with him. What he didn't see was that the process was already working, just not in ways he expected. His reactions were calmer, his focus was sharper, and his self-trust was stronger. But because those changes weren't dramatic, he almost quit. This is the trap of outcome obsession. When you fixate on results, you overlook the internal shifts that actually create them. Progress rarely announces itself. It accumulates quietly, beneath the surface, long before it becomes visible. People who understand this stop asking, "Is this paying off yet?" They ask, "Am I doing the work consistently?" That shift changes everything. Detaching from outcomes doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop letting results decide whether you continue. You commit to the process because it aligns with who you're becoming, not because it guarantees a specific payoff on a specific timeline. This is where patience transforms from passive waiting into active endurance. You keep going without reassurance. You repeat without validation. You trust without proof. And that trust is built from structure, not hope. There's another important reason outcome attachment is so damaging. It distorts your perception. When you're outcome-focused, every small setback feels like failure. Every delay feels like evidence that something isn't working. You interpret neutral moments negatively, and that interpretation drains energy. But when you're process-focused, setbacks become information. Delays become normal. Neutral moments are simply part of the rhythm. You stay steadier. This steadiness is what allows long-term change to take root. Think about any meaningful skill or transformation. The people who succeed aren't the most talented. They're the ones who stayed when things felt flat. Not exciting, not terrible, just flat. And that middle phase is where commitment is tested. And most people fail that test, not because they can't do the work, but because they expected the work to feel more rewarding. The process doesn't exist to motivate you. It exists to shape you. When you commit to it fully, you stop negotiating your effort based on how things feel. You stop adjusting intensity every time your emotions shift. You become stable. This stability allows you to move forward, even when enthusiasm disappears. Another powerful effect of committing to the process is reduced anxiety. When you focus on outcomes, your mind constantly scans the future. It worries about timing, comparison, and uncertainty. This creates mental noise. But when you focus on the process, your attention returns to the present. You deal with what's in front of you, nothing more. That simplicity is calming. You don't need to know how everything will turn out. You only need to know what today requires. And today rarely asks for perfection. It asks for participation. People who detach from outcomes develop a different kind of confidence. Not the confidence that comes from success, but the confidence that comes from reliability. They trust that if they keep showing up, progress will follow. Eventually, and eventually is enough. This mindset also protects you from comparison. When your focus is internal, on your effort, your habits, your standards, other people's timelines lose their power over you. Their success doesn't threaten you. Their pace doesn't rush you. You move at your rhythm. That autonomy is rare, and it's freeing. There's a simple practice that reinforces this shift. At the end of each day, don't ask, "What did I achieve?" Ask, "Did I honor the process? Did you show up? Did you do the work? Did you stay aligned with your standards?" If the answer is yes, the day was successful, regardless of outcomes. This reframes effort as identity reinforcement instead of result chasing. Over time, something interesting happens. The process stops feeling like something you endure. It becomes something you trust, a structure that holds you steady when motivation fades and uncertainty rises. And eventually, often when you least expect it, outcomes arrive. Not because you chased them, but because you became the kind of person who naturally produces them. That's the paradox. When you let go of outcomes, and you give them room to appear, because you're no longer forcing life to prove itself to you. You're proving yourself through consistency, quietly, patiently, relentlessly. And that commitment to the process, not the reward, is what carries you further than motivation ever could. Chapter 8. Become the person who doesn't quit. There is a moment that arrives quietly in every long journey. Not at the beginning, when motivation is high. Not at the end, when results are visible. But somewhere in the middle, where effort has become routine, progress feels slow, and quitting starts to sound reasonable. This is the moment that separates people who change from people who stay the same. Not talent, not intelligence, not luck. The difference is simple, but not easy. Some people quit, others don't. Most people assume quitting is a decision made all at once, a dramatic moment where someone gives up. But in reality, quitting happens gradually. It begins with skipping once, then excusing it, then lowering standards quietly. Until one day stopping feels natural. The people who don't quit understand something most never realize. They don't rely on motivation to continue. They rely on identity. They become the kind of person who finishes. This doesn't mean they never struggle. It means struggle no longer surprises them. They expect it, they plan for it, and when it arrives, they don't panic. Because quitting is no longer an option they entertain casually. There's a story that illustrates this clearly. A man once set a long-term goal that mattered deeply to him. In the beginning, progress was exciting. He felt driven, focused, alive. But months later, the excitement faded. Progress slowed. Life became noisy. Every reason to quit appeared logical. He wasn't failing, but he wasn't winning either. That middle space tested him more than any setback ever had. What kept him going wasn't inspiration. It was a quiet internal rule he had decided on early. I don't quit halfway. That rule wasn't emotional. It wasn't motivational. It was structural. When quitting crossed his mind, the rule answered for him. Not today. People who don't quit remove decision-making from moments of weakness. They decide ahead of time who they are, before fatigue, doubt, or boredom enters the conversation. This is crucial, because when you decide in the middle of discomfort, emotion wins. When you decide in advance, identity wins. Becoming someone who doesn't quit doesn't mean forcing yourself endlessly. It means narrowing your focus. You stop asking, "Do I feel like continuing?" You ask, "What does finishing look like today?" That question changes everything. Finishing today might mean a small step. It might mean showing up tired. It might mean doing less, but not nothing. Consistency doesn't require intensity. It requires continuity. Another reason people quit is because they attach quitting to relief. They think stopping will make them feel better. Sometimes it does, temporarily. But relief fades quickly, and what replaces it is something heavier: regret. People rarely regret effort. They regret abandoning themselves. Becoming someone who doesn't quit changes your relationship with discomfort. Discomfort stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like a signal that something meaningful is happening. The people who endure understand this instinctively. They don't interpret difficulty as evidence they're on the wrong path. They interpret it as confirmation they've left the familiar. And leaving the familiar always feels unstable at first. This mindset also protects you from perfectionism. Perfectionism convinces people to quit because they believe imperfect effort isn't worth continuing. But progress doesn't require perfection. It requires presence. Showing up imperfectly beats quitting perfectly. People who don't quit allow themselves to be unfinished, slow, and imperfect. They don't wait to feel proud before continuing. Pride comes later, after persistence. There's another important shift that happens when you become someone who doesn't quit. You stop over-identifying with short-term outcomes. A bad day no longer defines you. A missed goal no longer discourages you. A setback no longer shakes your sense of direction. You zoom out. You understand that identity is built over time, not days. Quitting often feels like self-protection, but in reality, it's self-abandonment. And over time, repeated self-abandonment erodes confidence. Finishing, even imperfectly, does the opposite. It builds self-respect. Every time you continue despite discomfort, you send a message inward. I don't leave myself when things get hard. That message compounds. Eventually, quitting feels foreign, not because it's impossible, but because it no longer aligns with who you are. This doesn't mean you never change direction. It means you don't quit impulsively, you adjust intentionally. There's a difference. Quitting is emotional, adjusting is strategic. People who don't quit give themselves permission to adapt, but not to disappear. They remain in motion. This chapter is not asking you to push endlessly or ignore your limits. It's asking you to commit to continuity, to remain engaged even when enthusiasm fades. Because enthusiasm always fades, identity remains. When you become the person who doesn't quit, life responds differently. Challenges don't disappear, but you handle them with more steadiness. You don't collapse under pressure. You don't retreat at the first sign of resistance. You stay. And staying, quietly, consistently, is one of the most powerful decisions a person can make. Not because it guarantees success, but because it guarantees growth. And growth, over time, reshapes everything. Your confidence, your habits, your sense of self. You stop asking if you're capable. You know because you've stayed before. Becoming the person who doesn't quit isn't about willpower. And it's about loyalty. Loyalty to the version of yourself you're building, especially when progress feels invisible. And once that loyalty is established, change no longer feels fragile. It becomes inevitable. If you've stayed with this audiobook until now, take a moment to acknowledge something important. You didn't rush. You didn't skip ahead. You stayed. That alone says more about you than any goal or plan ever could. Because this journey was never about collecting ideas. It was about seeing yourself more clearly, about noticing patterns, about understanding why change has felt so difficult and why it's still possible. Nothing you heard here was meant to overwhelm you. There were no grand promises, no shortcuts, no guarantees. Just a quiet invitation to look inward and take responsibility for the one thing you truly control. Who are becoming. Throughout this audiobook, we didn't focus on changing your circumstances. We focused on changing how you relate to yourself when circumstances don't change. Because that's where real power lives. And you learned that waiting keeps you stuck, not because you're lazy, but because waiting trains hesitation. You saw how negotiating with your old self quietly erodes trust. You recognized the influence of your inner dialogue and how clarity matters more than positivity. You learned to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. You practiced pausing instead of reacting. You understood the value of discipline in silence. You detached from outcomes and committed to process. And finally, you stepped into the identity of someone who doesn't quit. None of these shifts happens overnight, and they're not supposed to. Real change is rarely loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with certainty or confidence. It arrives quietly through repetition, restraint, and honesty. And here's the truth that matters most. That if nothing outside your life changes immediately, that doesn't mean this work failed. It means the work has begun, because inner change always happens before outer evidence appears. There will be days when this feels easy, and days when it feels pointless, days when you feel grounded, and days when doubt returns. That's not regression, that's the process. You're not meant to feel strong all the time. You are meant to remain consistent. Consistency doesn't mean perfection. It means staying engaged, showing up again after setbacks, continuing without applause. And when you fall off, and you will, what matters most is not how long you stayed disciplined, but how quickly you return. That return builds character. One of the most important shifts you can make from here on is this. Stop measuring your progress by how motivated you feel. Start measuring it by how often you keep your word to yourself. Motivation comes and goes. Self-trust compounds. And self-trust is what allows you to move forward even when you feel uncertain, tired, or uninspired. From this point forward, your task is not to change everything. It's to choose one small standard and honor it. One routine you don't negotiate. One behavior you repeat. One boundary you maintain. Not because it's impressive, but because it's yours. The outside world may still be unpredictable. People may still disappoint you. Progress may still take longer than you want. But when your inner foundation is stable, those things no longer define you. You stop feeling like life is happening to you. You start feeling like you're meeting life where you stand. That shift is subtle, but it's transformative. And if you ever find yourself slipping back into waiting, remember this. You don't need to feel ready. You need to decide. If you ever hear your old self negotiating, remember this. Standards don't require debate. If your inner voice becomes loud and critical, remember this. Clarity guides better than judgment. If discomfort shows up, remember this. Discomfort is not danger, it's training. If things outside your control trigger you, remember this. Pause returns power. If discipline feels lonely, remember this. What you build in silence lasts. If results feel slow, remember this. The process is shaping you even when outcomes are delayed. And if quitting whispers to you, remember this. You are becoming someone who stays. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You don't need to rush your growth. You don't need to be perfect. And you just need to remain loyal to the work. Because when you change who you are inside, life has no choice but to respond, eventually, quietly, gradually, inevitably. And before you go, think again of that person who came to mind earlier. The one who's struggling, the one who feels stuck, the one who might be waiting just like you once were. If this audiobook helped you, even a little, share it with them. Not to tell them what to do, not to fix them, but to remind them that change doesn't start when the world improves. It starts the moment someone decides to stop waiting and begins again from within. Thank you for listening.